It seems you're live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Ruby Tuesday, June. Oh, it's half the year already. It's quick. We already have comments coming in. All right.
Hello.
Okay, so as I was saying, Ruby Tuesday 82, 1st of June. So this Ruby Tuesday is brought to you by Engineers.mi for sponsoring StreamYard, KR, Ruby Brigade, and also DigitalOcean. Oops. All right. Let's see, a quick word from our sponsor this time, DigitalOcean. Let me put it up real quick. Let's see. Right, DigitalOcean and its developer cloud simplifies.
Do you have a slide for this, or we just
no?
reading
I'm just reading from our meetup. Yeah, because it's all text. So yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So DigitalOcean and its developer cloud simplifies modern app creation for new generations of developer, from individual developers to startup and service. Its infrastructure and platform as a service, IaaS and PaaS solutions require no DevOps experience, allowing developers to focus their energy on creating innovative software. By combining power simplicity, love for developer community, and obsession for customer service and the advantages of open source, DigitalOcean brings software development within technical and economic reach of anyone around the world. For more information, visit digitalocean.com or follow DigitalOcean on Twitter. You can find the full text in our meetup for this event as well. Okay, sorry about that. So we're on Facebook, join us there. Meetup is where all the events are posted, so definitely find us on Meetup. We'll be using GitHub today. So as part of the workshop that we'll be doing later, there will be code and also command line prompts that will be shared through GitHub. So if you haven't created an account, do start creating it. We'll have time to do that as well, so don't worry about it. Slack as well is where we chat. So today, part of the workshop also will be ushering everybody to join a Slack channel. I'll share the channel later. But if you haven't joined Ruby and my Slack, do join us at bit.ly Ruby and my Slack. For other events like Code Clinic, we use Discord. Okay. Hey everybody, I'm Gui, joined by Tristan as well as Gui from Penang. All right, so reminder number one, comment or chat if you're on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitch. Again, this time, this meetup, we'll be using Slack more because it's more an interactive workshop. So again, I'll be sharing the channel in a bit. But if you haven't joined Slack, do join us at bit.ly/RubyMySlack. Code of conduct. So we follow the Ruby Community Conduct Guideline. And we expect everybody to follow these guidelines. Participants be tolerant of opposing views. Participants must ensure their language and actions are free of personal attacks and disparaging personal remarks. When interpreting words, action, and others, participants should always assume good intentions and behavior that are reasonably considered harassment will not be tolerated. Okay, do we have any hiring shoutouts to do?
No, funny, and nobody mentioned for today, I think.
Okay, all right. Majority of hiring posts is in Facebook and sometimes in Slack. So definitely check out our Facebook page and in Slack if you're already in there. All right. Okay, workshop. Bring a Ruby on Rails app live to production using DigitalOcean. So the Slack channel we'll be using is rt-82_workshop. So again, please join our Slack and then we can communicate there.
Do you have the link for the Slack invite again? Maybe we can put that on the comments.
Yep, let me flash it out at the comments.
Right.
Yep, so everybody should see
join us.
Okay, once again, let me paste this as well.
It's interactive, so if you have questions or if we're going too fast or there is a special issue that's only happening on your computer, then ping us on Slack or ping anyone on Slack, or just mention it on this channel, and then someone will, most likely Gui will get back to you.
Yeah. Okay, I guess I'll be passing on to Gui. Hi Gui, take it away.
My screen. Okay, so let's start. So for this workshop, we will start with setting up the essential accounts and also the environment. So first thing first, GitHub. So for those who doesn't have GitHub account, please go to github.com and sign up and log in. For those who already have account, please log in. So next will be getting our project. So the link is this one. So KRXRB, I will paste it on the comments. Let me paste it on the comments. Can I know? Like,
I'll do it. I'll do it.
Yep, sure. So yeah, then paste it. You will see it on the comment. So remember to fork the code. Let me show how we can do that. So basically go to fork and then click, and then choose your username. Yeah, then you're able to fork over to your site. Okay, for those who stuck on this, you can go to Slack. Yeah, some question around that. Okay. Then the next thing is you need to clone your repo to your local computer. So for this one, you go to code here. For those who doesn't have publicly set up on GitHub, you can do the HTTPS. If you have the SSH set up, you can use the Git option. Open my terminal. Okay, so we do git clone. Never mind, I didn't set up correctly. Never mind, I go for HTTPS. They try to set up again. Clone. Okay. So next we will be going into the repo. For our project, we are using RVM. So for those who need to install RVM, later we'll go through it on the server side. But for your local, you can visit the RVM website if you want to continue develop using RVM. Right? Yeah. Installing RVM. Okay. So there's also a link that you need to open. So this is the
If you paste that on private chat, then I'll put that on the. I'll broadcast that.
Yes. Okay, I will put that in. Okay, so continue. So this is the gist of all the script that we'll be using for this workshop. So you don't have to type like every time you go for the slides, right? So this contains all the necessary code that you need to type on the terminal. Okay. Until here so far, anyone have issues can go to Slack or in the comment section, please comment. We'll wait for like 2 minutes so we can go for a review workshop. Yeah. Anyone stuck on this part of the slides? Do you able to get the script? This script, the gist file. Okay. If no one else have problem, then okay, we'll move on.
Hello,
so
developer Steve. We just saw you join Slack.
Yep.
We have.
So the next part is sign up DigitalOcean account. For those who haven't done that yet and just joined this event, this is the link to the credit from DigitalOcean. So do.co/Ruby code. Then you receive $100 credit for you to use. Yeah. So for those, I think most of you will receive a newsletter from Ruby Malaysia on the link to redeem that $100 credit. Yeah, it's the same link. So create your account. See anyone have issue? Okay, no. Okay, let's continue. So first we'll create a droplet. So basically a VM on DigitalOcean, right? So for DigitalOcean, when you log in, you'll see something like this. Okay. Then we go for droplets. Then we create droplet. Then we choose Ubuntu LTS. And then we go for the $5 option, regular internal SSD, Singapore, because it's nearer to Malaysia. Then we go for SSH keys. So for these options, we will recommend you to create SSH keys. So that's the next slide. So basically, if you don't have a SSH key and you are on a Linux or Mac machine, you can call using SSH keygen. Then you enter a few times, you're able to see a file called id-_rsa.pub inside the SSH folder. Just need to copy the content, like something like this. So let me see here. Okay. So it will be something like this. So then id-rsa. Yeah, you will have something like this, right? Then you basically need to copy this over and then paste it on this here and then give it a name, right? So we already have that previously. So, and then this is the name. You want to change it or not, it depends on you. Other than that, everything looks good, and we'll create our droplet. Okay, so for the SSH key for Windows user, right? So there's a link for the Windows user that if you need a SSH key, you just need to follow the steps here. You can paste it on private channel so that everyone know. Okay. Yep. So this you can follow the steps here to create your SSH key either from Windows 10 or using PuTTY. Okay. So the next part, it's going into the VPS, so basically the VM. Okay, so you can see here, you already created a droplet. Then first we copy the IP address here, right? And then we go for terminal. So the first user you will have in your droplet is root. So there's no other user on the machines right now. Okay. So this, let me make it bigger. Okay. Yep, this is better. So you can see here, you're able to get into as root, right? So next part we'll be going for is add a non-root user. So for our application, we need to have a non-root user to deploy our application, right? So all these steps are listed in the script that the gist file that the link given to you. So basically we just copy over one by one. Let's see whether I can do this. Easier. Okay. So first we do user add. Then we will do add it into a sudo, and then we want the user to know. Okay, we want the user to able to access sudo without password. Okay, and then we S. So this is basically login as the deploy user. So now you can see here we have deploy rather than root. Now we are signing in as deploy. And then the next thing we'll need to do is cd. We go for the correct folder. Previously we are in root. Now we are in the correct folder for deploy. Next thing we'll need to do is ssh region. Just press a few enter, then you generate a key for this machine and this user, right? Next thing we'll be doing is touch authorization. So this is create a file called authorized key. So this file will contains all the public key that you allow to access your VM, right? And then we have a command called this one. So what we do here is basically we copy the content from the root. Authorized key means the public key that we set for root user to the current deploy user, so that they have the same public key to allow the user to log into the VM. Okay, after everything is done, we exit. We go back to our local machine, and now we try to SSH as deploy. Just now we do as root, right? Now we do it, we SSH using deploy. Now, okay, so now you can see that you actually sign in with deploy, right? So the next part is install dependency. So for Ruby to work, we need some dependency, right? So can go to the script file. It's basically the same. So you just need to copy. Okay. So the first part is to install like pqdev node.js npm. So pqdev is needed for Postgres. Node.js and npm is for Node.js that we need for Rails. It should be the latest. Okay, while we're waiting here, so the next part will be doing npm install yarn. So we need npm to install yarn for this workshop. Yarn is the official node, I think, not packager.
Package manager, yeah.
Yeah, package manager for Rails. Yeah. So for Rails, it's using Yarn as default.
I guess it's a bit slower because we're using the cheapest Droplet with only one CPU. And regular something, what's it? The regular SSD, not the premium one.
Yep. So we are using the $5 one, which is the cheapest that you can get on DigitalOcean.
It's $5 per month, right?
Yeah, $5 per month. So if you use for a few hours, it will be like maybe 7 cents. Yeah. So it's still running. It's give it some time. Okay, so next we'll be installing Yarn. Okay.
And you have to be root in this one because npm was installed as root.
Yeah. So later, I think I need to update this also so that everyone get the correct one. Yep. Okay. So now Yarn is installed. We go for GPG. So this is the steps to install RVM. You can get it from the RVM official website. Just following the steps for RVM. Okay, you can see the keys has been imported. Next is to install RVM. Done. So next we do -l. So we re-log in so that the RVM is in place. Next we install Ruby 3. Okay, so for this workshop we are using Ruby 3 because this is the latest stable version that I think will release on December 25th. Yeah. So now we are installing Ruby 3. Take some time, and then we can go back to basically the last one. Okay, so any questions on Slack that you have issue with? Okay, so do message in Slack if you're not able to follow or have questions. We have some time for us to debug.
Okay. So what GUI did was to provision the machine that we're deploying to. So like basically it's preparing that. Usually you would have like provisioning tools like let's say Ansible or Chef or Puppet to do that. But what GUI did basically is to just do it manually as like commands, which is fine as well. It's not as automated as some of the provisioning tools, but it's still okay. Because usually with cloud providers like DigitalOcean, you can provision it once, save it as an image, and then redeploy the same image over and over to multiple VMs. But for now, we'll just use one, and we just wanted to teach how exactly do provisioning tools do the thing by doing it manually ourselves. So now once our Droplet is provisioned, actually GUI, I think what we forgot is to create a database. So I will do that now as well.
Okay, yeah, you can do that.
Go to databases. So DigitalOcean has not only droplets, they also have managed databases, right? So we'll create a database cluster. We'll do Postgres, of course. We'll use the defaults. It's fine. Singapore. It's 15 US per month. But then again, because we have like all of the free credits, it's fine for experimentation. And we have this. So we create a database cluster. We just choose Singapore because it's the same region as our Droplet. We get started. We have this. We choose the trusted source as the Droplet that we created, and we only allow the inbound sources. And this is what we want for later. So we copy this. I will go back to my VS Code. I'll put this temporarily because we will be creating the environment for the database later on. So if you have cloned your repository, you will start off with main. And so if you switch your branch to add Capistrano, because we'll be using Capistrano for the deployment, you'll see that I've created a README file with the steps here. So this is going to happen on your local computer, where parts of it will be on the server because we'll be copying over some environment and some configuration onto the server. But most of the things we're going to be doing on your local. I've already done most of the setup, but I will go through the same things as well here. So the first thing is we want to add Capistrano to the gem file. And I will put that into this side. So this is the plain Rails gem file when you start installing Rails. We add Capistrano to the gem file. You bundle. Then cap install. Or if you want to be like specific that it's running the bundler version for Capistrano, bundle exec cap install. I've already done cap install in this branch, which is why when it created config deploy, it says this particular file already exists, staging already exists, production already exists, and all of these things are already existing. So it's skipping it and it's already capified. So you'll see that I already have deploy.rb. I have all of these files there. But if it's a fresh installation, then you don't have that. Next, you want to add these two gems, Capistrano Rails and Capistrano RVM. RVM because we're using RVM on the server, and the paths might need some management to work with. This just makes it a lot more convenient to work with the RVM specific installation of Ruby. If you're using the system installed Ruby, then you don't need Capistrano RVM. But for this workshop, we're going to be using that. Capistrano Rails gives you some tasks for pre-compiling assets or doing, let's say, database migrations. So it gives convenience hooks for this as well. Again, add that, bundle, and then after you install this, you have to enable some of them on this file called the cap file. So most of them are commented out, and these ones you remove the comment. So you want Capistrano RVM, you want the bundler, Rails assets, and Rails migrations. The others, if you're not using them, especially if you don't have the gem installed, then you should not comment them, remove the comment from them, because otherwise it will ask for the required library, and it's not going to work. Okay, so after that, you will have a default deploy.rb file. Here, most of them are going to be commented. I've already uncommented most of them. What is important would be this git repo URL. So we already have the git repo URL. I will copy that and put that here. Because what Capistrano does is it actually runs a script onto the provision server, and it's going to clone the repository from this URL. So the script is not going to run on your local, it's going to run on the provision server. We'll set the default branch. So in GitHub, it's main, but you might have something like production branch, for example, or deploy branch. It depends on your setup. In this case, we want to deploy from the main branch. We also set a deploy to. It's going to be /home/deploy/setup. Sometimes you might want to put it on var www if you want to follow the specifications, the usual specifications that you put websites on this place. But since we have a deploy user, we'll just put it on deploy on home deploy app. Everything else you can keep uncommented. We want to add this line, this file, because on Rails 5.2 onwards, secrets are governed by config/master.key, and I think we need to GUI, I think we need to give the master key, because otherwise they're not going to be getting the credential.
So I will put the master key in the gist file so that you can create.
Okay. In that case, I will cat my config. So this is because we're doing the same repository. We're doing it like this, but master.key is ignored by default, right? You have an ignore master key, so you're not going to see it in your repo. You have to copy it over to config/master.key. Why do you have to do that? It's part of the security model. This is your key that governs the encryption of your credentials, and this is not supposed to be committed to your repository. It's not supposed to be publicly available, let's say. If you're within the team, then you share it within your password manager, for example, or within configuration settings, or within some sort of bastion. But otherwise, they should not be publicly available, because that will be a security problem. But because this is a workshop, then we're going to give you the master key. GUI will put the master key on the link. You just, if you're using VS Code, you do config/master.key, then you paste in the key into that file and then save it. And then later on, we are going to be copying that over into the provision server, because the server needs to know the key. We uncomment linked files. Everything else, we uncomment the keep releases so that Capistrano does multiple deployments. It will keep the last 5 deployments, and you can easily roll back to previous 5. And I added a small script. So if you want to do automation in Capistrano, you can write what's called a Capistrano task. I just put it on deploy.rb. Usually you'll put it on tasks and then require that. But I'll just tack that at the end. This is how it looks like. What it does is it just uploads the config master key into the shared folders that we're going to be using. That's why we had to do a link for master key here. So we'll run this command a bit later as well. So once we're done with deploy.rb, we go to production.rb. If you remember, this is one of the files that was created when we did the bundle exec apt install. We need to fill in the IP address, and if we go back to DigitalOcean here, go back to our droplets. This is our IP address. You copy that. Git deploy at the IP address. And that's it. That's it for production.rb. This is a minimized version of production. What it used to look like is staging. It's very verbose with the different kinds of options you can do. But the minimum that you need would be the roles, and if you're going to be doing some setting SSH options. In this case, we want to do SSH forwarding via an SSH agent, because we don't want to, in this case, we are not doing a deployment via the SSH keys that is in the server. Like GUI showed how to generate an SSH key. We're not going to be using that. We're going to be using the SSH key that is on your local and forwarding that through your SSH agent. Which is why we need to run this command, eval the SSH agent, and add the default SSH key. And we do an initial check. Now, this is going to, you'll see here, it's going to SSH into the server. So it's deploy at this IP address. It uploads the whole script, and then it will execute that. And it will do all of these, make there. It will do create these shared directories. It will create the config directory. It will fail. This is an expected failure because we haven't had the database configuration on the server yet, which is why we need to SSH into the server, SSH deploy at copy the IP address. This should be app slash. Okay, I'll put the whole home slash deploy. I'll put the whole path here. I use Nano. You can use Vim. It doesn't matter. I like this one. I have an example database YAML that you can use. So I'll copy that, paste that here, and then take a look at the configuration that we got from DigitalOcean, because this is the configuration in order to connect to that database that we just provisioned. Username is doadmin. So we'll go here, paste that. The password is this thing. We'll paste that. This whole thing is the host. This is the host. It's that. The port is 25060. It's that. And the database is default DB. And we don't need to care about the SSL mode at this point. Save that. So if you'll take a look at the config, you'll have database.yaml at that particular location, right? So that takes care of the database configuration, and we can now copy over the master key. So again, these things, I should probably mention that. Log out of the server. And we run this on the local machine. Because this is, again, every Capistrano command is started from your local machine, but is executed on the remote machine. Right now, we only have one machine, but there are multiple configurations, like mentioned here, for example, on staging, where you can have multiple IP addresses for a particular server. So you can just run, let's say, this, and you have 20 servers in your production cluster. It will run this same command, like this same upload execution, all throughout your 20. We're not going to go at that point right now because that's a bit complicated right now. We're just going to deal with just a single file, a single server, but the concepts are the same. So this one uploaded config master key onto the shared path. And now we can do our initial deploy. And this is something that you might want to try and watch. Because again, the Capistrano script is initiated on your local machine, but is executed on the remote machine. What that means is that you need to have a stable internet connection from your machine, because SSH, if the SSH tunnel is broken, then the deployment is stopped. Like for example, if the network, if you're on 3G or 4G, let's say, and you're doing a deployment and you get a network disconnection, then the whole deployment stops, or like it's interrupted in the middle. You need to be able to continue on. So some people would, for example, have another cloud machine which is used for deployments, which they will run Capistrano deploy on that cloud machine, so that we know that it's going to be always online, or at least as online as much as your target machine. But you'll see that with only a few configuration directives that we've changed, Capistrano is going to do all of the things here. It checks the directories, it clones the repository that we mentioned, make sure it's updated. It creates a release a release folder. It symlinks some of the folders that should be common across releases. Like for example, the logs. If you deploy in the middle, you don't want to CD into each particular release to find out what are the logs. You just want them tailing each other. So that's a convenience here. It will do a bundler config, which is suitable for production. It's not going to bundle development and test gems, for example. It's going to cache your gems into a shared bundle folder. It's going to set deployment true. I'm not sure exactly what this does. Probably sets up some flags so that it doesn't, I guess it doesn't install documentation, for example. I'm not sure. We'll have to take a look. But this one automates these things so that you don't have to remember. It's also going to do a bundle install, and it is going to take some time because this is your initial deployment. Again, it's initiated local, but it executes on the remote server. And our remote server has only, I think, let's see. I think we only have one CPU for this. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think we only have one CPU or, yeah, 1 gig of memory. So the configuration is not that like powerful. Usually these things become faster as the more powerful your machine is. And so we'll just, yeah, it takes about 2 minutes in this case. So it will do the bundle install. It will do an asset precompile. Again, automated. I didn't have to configure that. It's part of the Capistrano-Rails gem that does that. And it does all of the Yarn stuff as well, which is, so if you remember, GUI provisioned the server with Yarn. These are the dependencies that are required. So aside from Ruby, it requires Node.js and it requires Yarn. Like he mentioned, Rails by default uses Yarn for its asset compilation. Creates the manifest files, also runs the migration. You can see that our configuration is working because it was able to create the migration for us. This one is interesting. One of the last few things that Capistrano will do is to symlink this symlink into the latest release. So you don't have to do this. At this point, deployment is done, right? The initial deployment is done. But I'm just going to SSH back. So usually after your first SSH, after you copy over database.yaml, you don't have to SSH into the server anymore unless you want to do maintenance. This is like the final SSH into the server that you're going to do. But I'm just going to do that now just to show you what the structure is that Capistrano did. So again, app, this one, you will remember is where we put our deploy to. Set deploy to is the home deploy app. But you'll see that this is not the Rails application. This is like a layer on top of your application. Your actual application is in here called current. So if you go to current, you'll see that this is the Rails application. It has all of the files from your Rails application. But you'll see that this is a symlink to this folder, right? If you CD into that, you'll see it's the same thing. But if you go back one layer above, you'll see that well, this is the first deployment. You'll see that there will be multiple. I'll do another quick deployment here. Where am I? Oops. You will notice that there will be multiple dates in here. And current will always be tracking the latest deployed folder. And it is going to be the last thing that Capistrano will do but by that point, all of the files that are required for the deployment are finished. And symlinking is you can call it an atomic operation. Like it either succeeds or it does not. It does not succeed halfway. There's no interruption with symlinking, at least in this environment. So when you symlink to it, later on when we do our web server configuration, when the web server is restarted, it will pick up the new release. That way, you can have almost zero downtime deployments, at the same time, almost zero downtime rollbacks. Because if you want to roll back, you just point current into the previous release. We're almost done here. I just wanted to another deployment. So you'll see that the previous deployment took about 4 minutes until the last command. But here it only took like 1 minute because most of the stuff like the dependencies for bundler are already done. So it's actually skipped. There are some Capistrano gems that will check that will hash your assets and will not precompile if the hashes are the same. So it will precompile, for example, on your local, which is usually faster because you will usually have a faster machine than your deployment server, and then check if the assets are modified, and then it will not compile the assets on the server if they're not modified. Again, still saving you even more time. But now, if you SSH into server, app releases, you see that there are two. This is our deploy from 3 minutes ago. This is our current deploy. Current is now reflecting 1442. It used to be 0853. So like I mentioned, it is pointing to the latest deployment that we did. And another thing is you can check the revisions log. And you'll see all of the deployments that had happened and what is the git commit that was deployed. So this is great for like some audit purposes or for like making sure that you know what exactly is the git hash that was deployed onto the server. So at this point, again, deployment is done. You are not expected to SSH into the server anymore unless you want to do some further provisioning, or in this case, we're going to the next segment, which is the provisioning of the actual web server via Nginx.
Tristan, there's a question about the symlink. Right? Is the symlink to the build files?
To the what? Sorry.
Build files. Files that were built.
Yes. Right. So here, that's on Slack, right?
That's from YouTube.
Let's see. Oh, that's from YouTube. If you are on YouTube, I would recommend you go to Slack because there are more people that see the Slack. All right, this is Xian Xionghuang. Current is the symlink to the latest deploy file. So if you look at current, this is the Rails application, and the asset precompile runs on this context. I will scroll up and look at here, for example. So it does deploy assets precompile. It's running that. The working directory of this command is in that release folder. So if you scroll up a bit more, you'll see that it actually created this folder. Right? It creates the folder. It creates a dash p. That means all of the parents are created. So it creates this, and then it will run most of the further, like bundle, for example, or this precompile in the working directory of this release. And you'll see it compiles the packs onto the public packs. That's the destination. Again, all of the configuration can be fine-tuned on the Capistrano gem. If you look at the documentation there, but most of the defaults are like they just work, just like how Rails does things. It's just magic. It just works. If you want to configure things, then it's not as convenient. So we just do whatever is the default. Does that answer it? Yeah. Okay. Noted. Yes, hopefully that answers your question. Right, so yeah, again, That's really, if you really just want to like take a look at the structure that Capistrano did, you can SSH into it. But as for this deployment, in the sense of copying your code and making sure the code is production ready on the server, is fine. But we are going to be going to the next segment by GUI, which is exposing your application, because right now it's there but it's not exposed, right? The first one that we did is provisioning the server, so preparing the server. The second one is copying the code over, which is done by Capistrano. The third one is exposing the application. And I think GUI, you can take this away now.
Yep. On my screen. Okay, good. So next we'll be going for the web server Nginx. So we'll be using Passenger. So Passenger is an open source web application server. It handles HTTP and also administration monitoring. Yeah. So the script that I provide on the gist, we have the command that we need. So first thing first, we need to go to our terminal. Let me clear first. Okay, so we need to SSH into that. Okay. Right. Okay, so now we are in the server. First, we need to go as root. We need to sign in as root, so sudo su. And then we'll need to install the dependency. So here, dependency. Okay. Next part is to add the key to the passenger. Okay, and then next part, get the CAs, search stuff. And then we will need to add the Debian repo list. Okay. So next would be just apt-get update and then install passenger. Okay. After we install passenger, we need to enable passenger, right? So it's the same thing. So the script is here in the file. Copy and paste it. And then you ensure that the file is exists, so you do ls. Next, we want to restart the Nginx server because we add something to the Nginx config. And then next part is to validate if our passenger is installed correctly or not. So we do passenger. So it says that everything looks good. So means, okay, so the passenger is installed. Next, we'll need to go for sudo as we deploy. So we need to go back to our deploy user so that we know which Ruby the passenger can use. So this is the command. You can see that here. Let's see whether this is the correct one. I think I need to install the app correct first. No RPM. So from here, you can see passenger Ruby. Because we are using RVM, I didn't see any RVM here though.
Can you, which Ruby on this one? Which Ruby?
Which Ruby?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Which, okay. Bash dash L? Yeah, now it's,
the sudo, the sudo deploy part. Yeah, got it. Yeah. So later I add that in also. Okay. So now we are in here. So we see that it's actually using this part. We will need to copy this down, right? So to use on Nginx, because later we'll need this, right? So this is the information that you want to commit, copy. Okay. Next we exit so that we can go back to root, and then we open a file called etc nginx site enable my app conf, and then what to put inside here is actually this portion. Let me make it bigger so that everyone can see. Okay, so from here you can see that, okay, server name, you need to put your IP here. So what's your server IP? You need to put it here. So for those who have domain, you can put it here. So for us, we basically go for Droplet. And then copy this IP address. And then paste it here. Okay. And then where is the app public? So for us, we are using home deploy app current public. And then the line just now, we saw it's this, right? So you paste the line for passenger, you paste it here. So passenger will be, and then the one that we just now see. Then we save it. Okay. So the next step will be we restart the service, the Nginx service, and then we try to access the website, right? So just now the IP, and then we can access the website. So you can see the website is up. So now everything is working as expected. Yeah. So the database is up. The website is hosted on Droplet, and so that's all from us. So we can see on the slides I highlighted those. I think that's pretty much it from the slides.
I think you wanted to share the 12-factor website as well, right? There's a final. There.
12-factor.
So I think it's on the private chat comments. 12factor.net.
Oh yeah. Wait. Let me see. Share. Okay. Yep. So the way we deploy, it's not following all 12-factor app, but we do have certain how to say
philosophies. The 12-factor is a good best practice to make sure that your deploys are reliable and you don't expose information like security risks outside. So like they're reliable, they're repeatable, and they're security free. So it has these principles. The way we've done it is like not exactly 12 factor, but because we were using Capistrano, it deals with a lot of the 12 factor stuff. Like for example, the configuration, the build release run. They're like this automates many of the 12 factor philosophies. I think the only thing that really we need to follow further would be the logs being streamed as into std out, because right now the logs by default in Rails are written to a file, but there are many services that can that can change it to pipe into syslog, let's say, or to a remote syslog. So there are different ways to go about that. And also the dependencies, like I mentioned, during the provisioning, we were doing it manually. But if you want to like do the infrastructure setup as code, which is like doing it as a set of instructions, then you can script the provisioning, or you can use something like Chef, Ansible, or Puppet, or something like Kubernetes, let's say, for getting the Docker Compose, let's say, for getting some of the required dependencies and infrastructure saved as configuration. So they're declarative instead of like you have to go one by one to each server and then install one by one. One way of, again, with through DigitalOcean, one way you can do is you can provision a server once, save that as an image, and use that as the dependency. So basically you have one whole server image as a dependency. You just replicate that over and over, and then you deploy into that. So it's the same image, but different types of configuration based on the image. You just replicate it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, so far, anyone have any questions that you want to leave in Slack for the workshop?
I'm not sure. Gui, do you have a question? Did you follow along?
Well, I'll try to until I didn't reach the part on the database part, and then I couldn't catch up because I think you changed the URL, and I was like, I didn't see it, and then but it's fine. You commit the changes, right? And then I think I can follow later from there. So no worries. I also
I can quickly go back there.
Like, no, it's I also like
okay.
I know there's a part because I created a droplet yesterday and I didn't use the LTS. So the version that so I'm using the latest release of Ubuntu 21, and the passenger there's no passenger package for that yet. So I hit an error when I tried to install passenger. So yeah.
You can install the Bionic version of passenger. I think that still works. So you can try the Bionic one. So for the database, you can just go. Sorry, I could click quickly. You go to the DigitalOcean, because I've used DigitalOcean ever since, like, I forgot which year, but when it first started, it was a competitor from Linode. It was very bare, and it's actually very different now, so much easier to use. And it has this Cloud SQL thing, like Cloud SQL competitor, which I think we're looking into, because the GCP Cloud SQL is really, really expensive, and this one is a lot cheaper than compared to the Google Cloud SQL. We prefer to host it as a managed instance instead of, because you can always do a Postgres or MySQL install and manage it yourself, right? Yep. But then it becomes a problem of your master slave configuration, like the replication status, the tailing of the binary logs, and all of these things. It becomes very, very complicated. Backups are you have to write your own backup routine. Like it become the management of your own installation of Postgres or MySQL is just too much, that we'd rather have that as a service. But Cloud SQL is very expensive, and so this one is really, really nice. It's cheap enough, and it's really easy to manage. Like the configuration is like this, and I really like when it asked me where the like the source, like which I haven't looked into it deeply. Like I'm not sure if it's using IP tables to make sure the connections are from a specific network, or I'm not sure. Like maybe it's a network configuration, but I like that kind of security that that it does. Like if you notice, the way we set it up is only the droplet can access this database. So you can't even connect it from your computer. You have to connect from that droplet, and that kind of interaction, that means that no external party other than that droplet will have access to your database. So it has security by default. Unlike, for example, MongoDB, when we first started it, and there's still a lot of these installations, because MongoDB is relaxed by default, and so many sysads will just install MongoDB and then it's exposed to everyone because anyone can connect to a MongoDB instance, right? This is great because it's secure by default, and it gives a lot of confidence in their thing. So configuration is all there as well, and you don't have to like hunt around. You have to just find out what are the connection details, and that's it.
Nice. I also learned a lot from the Capistrano part that you did. So I never used Capistrano before, and you explaining like everything and the environments, that was really, really helpful.
Yeah. This is how Capistrano has been there for like almost more than a decade now. It's one of the very first deployment tools for Ruby and Rails. But if you'd notice, I keep on saying that you execute it on your local, and then you initiate it from local and then you execute it on the server. This is very much the way you would deploy, let's say, a WAR file into a Tomcat server, or a PHP website into an FTP server. Like even like 2 decades ago, this is still generally how things are. You have a piece of code that you copy over to a remote server and it runs there, because that is generally what deployment in broad strokes does. From your local machine, it moves there. What has advanced throughout the years would be like the guarantee that if it works on my machine, it will work on your machine, because now you have all of these containers like Dockers, for example, making sure that the environments are all the same. But it's the same thing. You compile the code into your Docker image, and then you copy it over to your deployment environment or to your servers. Could be managed by Kubernetes. It can be just like a Docker Compose service or a systemd init script onto your deployment server, but it's still the same thing. You initiate it on your local machine, and then it executes, or it's initiated on your local machine, it's copied over to the remote machine, and it's executed over there. It's still the same pattern. It's just different ways of going about it. And which is why we wanted to do this series, this workshop, because this is a good, like, back to basics, the fundamentals of what it means to do DevOps. Like, what exactly is happening? Like, for example, when I use Heroku, when I git push to Heroku master, like git push Heroku master, let's say, what exactly is happening there? Is the act of pushing to a branch the actual deployment, or is something else happening? Because you can see, for example, that maybe when you do a git push, there's probably a git hook on that deployment server, on the Heroku deployment server, that does this exact same thing. Well, not exactly, but similar thing. That is the trigger to copy the code over to their deployment machines and let it execute there. So there's a good, the patterns are there, so it's a good way to remember what exactly is happening and to learn about the fundamentals.
Yep. And you can run a data center server yourself, which doesn't have any container, any Kubernetes service. It's just plain old server. And this will help you a lot because you know the basic of things, how things work, rather than using services that's offered by the ISP or the service provider. Now you know how to Yeah, that's
Doesn't even have to be a cloud server, right? When I was doing freelancing, I once had a client where they just wanted it inside their intranet. And so they said they have this computer and we want the application to be available to all of the computers on that intranet. We don't want it accessible outside the network. You have to be part of the LAN, the local area network of that building, of that office, and you deploy to that box. And it's the same thing. It's the same concept. It's just that in cloud scenarios, you have most likely a container you're deploying to, or like maybe a bare metal if you roll like that, you get a bare metal service that's connected 24/7 to the internet. But it's the same concept if you're deploying to just like a CPU inside an office, and you just have everyone connected to that intranet. It's the same concept.
Yep. Do we want to go for SSL or I think move to the next one?
Yeah, I think we can do one. Although I think we have a question in general from Shum. Okay. For the flow from local to remote, is it using something like GitHub Actions? We didn't do any GitHub Actions. GitHub Actions is specific to GitHub. This is really Capistrano is just automating the act of copying code over into the remote server and executing scripts there to prepare it for production and then getting it ready. I'm not sure what you mean by the flow from local to remote. If we're bringing in GitHub Actions, then it's going to be doing the same thing. You probably don't need Capistrano. We did the Heroku example, right? Like when you do git push Heroku master, what exactly is happening? You can replicate that with GitHub Actions. You git push to a particular branch, and then GitHub Action can trigger on that, and it will do the copy into your deployment machine, and then do the massaging of the bundle, the precompile, etc. So again, the pattern is the same: copy over, prepare the environment, and do the bundle and precompilation. It just so happens it's GitHub Action that is a trigger. In this case, what we do is Capistrano is a trigger.
Yep. Basically, for our deployment, we don't need to have GitHub at all, because you can just have a Git on your local machine, and then Capistrano will handle all of this. So you don't have to have GitHub.
No, you can't exactly have Git on your local machine because the Git clone needs, so the deployment server needs to have access to the Git repository.
Okay.
So you can have Git in your machine, but if it has like access back to your machine, then yes. If you have a Git server on your machine, then yes, you can do that.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, this is
yeah, it depends on. Did I stop sharing? Yeah, sorry, I stopped sharing. This is part of the configuration here, right? Where is this? SCN. By default, Capistrano, so it's not here. Yeah, by default, Capistrano will do Git, but you can have different plugins like Mercurial or SVN subversion. And I'm sure there are ways to do tar files as well. Like you basically tar your folder and then put it onto an HTTP server and then have Capistrano get the latest tar file, let's say, and then copy it over. But again, it needs extra configuration, and the default configuration is through Git. And so in the case that you're talking about, have a Git hosted server on your local, as long as the deployment machine has access to that local environment, then it's fine. You can have a situation where you have a bastion, right? So you SSH into your bastion, and that's where you deploy from. And that is also your Git server. So your Git is hosted on that bastion server as well. That also works. So it's not really local. You're not deploying from local. but you're deploying from your bastion into your deployment targets, it's still the same concept. Xiong was saying so many ways for the same thing. Yes, that is the thing about fundamentals. That's why we want to learn the patterns, the basics of it, because once you learn the basics, it gives you a way to interpret different other patterns and say, I know this is similar to what I've done before. Even if you have no idea what the problem in production is, if you know generally how the pattern goes, you have a more intelligent approach into solving it, into debugging it, because you have the prior experience of a similar pattern. And again, as software developers, we want to be exposed to as many patterns as we want, because that's how we gain experience. That's how we make sure that even if we encounter new situations, we have something to fall back on. Like this, I've encountered something similar before, maybe this will work, maybe this will work.
Yeah, I think it's good to learn this.
Do you want to do the SSL, or do we not have enough time? Like, whoever is watching, do you want us to continue with SSL? Because right now we don't have SSL certificates. Or we can always do that next month again, or the next time we have a workshop. Maybe as a small talk, like a 30-minute talk. How do you add SSL? Again, it's not necessarily Ruby related, but you want your Ruby application to be secure. So, well, Xiong is asking about the SSL. Do you have time, Gui?
Yep, we can do SSL.
Okay. Yeah, so Xiong is talking about Heroku Dino Premium. Heroku is doing a great job at making sure you focus on your application, because most of the time the cost that you're paying a developer is for the application and not for the infrastructure, right? Usually you will have enough money to pay for the infrastructure and have your developer focus on the code. But there comes a point where you would rather have like a cheaper infrastructure cost by paying someone to set it up and then get rid of Heroku. Gui, are you sharing your screen?
I don't have the material for testing crypto. We have the material for that.
No, I don't think we go. I mean, we can wing it, I guess. With shell access, certbot.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll share my screen quickly. Let me try this. Let's see. Where is certbot? Okay, if you go to certbot.eff.org, right? Certbot instructions. My website is running Nginx on Ubuntu 20.04. So here's the thing: Gui, when we were preparing, you were asking which Ubuntu version are we going to use, right? I really like the LTS versions because most of the other services and most of the instructions will usually work on the LTS versions. And I think GUI Kale experienced this when you try to install and follow instructions for Passenger. I think, what's the latest? Focal? I think Focal is the latest. It doesn't have any binaries there. So it's always good to have to be using the LTS. So 20.04 is the latest LTS. We have comfort with the command line. An HTTP website, yes. Online, yes. With open port 80, yes. On server, yes, yes, yes. I don't know. We'll figure out wildcard later. Default. All right. Copy and paste. Sudo snap install core, snap refresh core. Sorry. Am I deploy? All right. Okay. Mounting core. Sudo snap install classic certbot. Okay. So SSL installation is a lot simpler nowadays because of Let's Encrypt. Before, you have to generate your certificates, buy them from an SSL provider and all of these things. Generate the keys on the server, etc. Then install them, configure a web server to use them. It becomes even complicated if you're using something like a load balancer. And so you need to figure out SSL termination and all these things. Now with certbot, it's a lot easier. Now it's just really copy and paste. So the certbot Nginx, I think we're going to be asked some questions. Email address. What email address are we going to use? What's the email address for KL Malaysia?
I think this email address is actually the domain email address though.
No, this is for renewal and security notices. I'll just use do-klxrd at my forwarder. I mean, we're going to delete this droplet later on anyway, so it's fine.
Yeah.
Please read the terms of service. Nobody reads terms of service. We just say yes. Would you be willing to share your email address? Yes. No names. Yes. So, good point. We can't install SSL because we don't have a domain. So, but since we don't have we can't install SSL without a domain. You can't install SSL on an IP address, just an IP address. So that's the most that we can do. But if we had a domain, you type this in, it will automatically configure your Nginx configuration with SSL, and that's it. Sorry, we can't proceed from here. Yeah, that's SSL.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we'll do SSL in a future Ruby meetup because we need to prepare for these things.
I'm not sure if you're checking Slack. Steve is asking if you want a subdomain. I'm not sure if he's offering or.
Yeah. That's why I mentioned that maybe next month for the next meetup we'll continue on. I guess we have 60 days for the droplets, so we'll prepare the domains, and so there's a more seamless presentation that everyone can follow. But yeah, we'll prepare the domains later on. I'm not sure what Xiong is asking about regarding accessories. Like, what do you mean by accessories? Like requirements? What with certbot, you just answer the questions. What do you have? And that usually are fine. That's because it's using the Let's Encrypt certificates. If you're using, like, I forgot the names of the VeriSign SSL certificates, or some of the more expensive ones, Komodo, let's say, then you'll need to follow their instructions on how to install the certificates, because that will be a different certificate signing authority. Yes, so for Namecheap, yes, so that's because I think Namecheap is using Komodo SSL. So you can't do Namecheap SSL because the signing authority is different. This is the Let's Encrypt authority for certificates. That's why they can automate it, because they can sign the certificates for you. For Namecheap, it has to come from Namecheap, and so there are a few things like some certificate authorities will require some kind of verification, especially for the ones with a green padlock or like the special thing that shows up on your URL, like the ones that banks use, for example. Those have a further increased verification that says this entity is who they say they are. If it says Maybank, this is actually Maybank. It's not just some authority that says Maybank. It's owned by Maybank, right? So there's a further and a stricter check of the what do you call this, of the entity. But in this case, we don't really need that kind. We are using SSL just so that we can encrypt the transport between the server and the client for the browser. So that is enough for our purposes. Let's encrypt is enough for that purposes. If you want like something like an e-commerce website, then that like a better stricter check of entities for your certificates would be better. Will there be any complete beginner level discussions? We haven't done most of them, although for code clinics, I think we have. Like we had a beginner, a complete beginner before, right, in a code clinic. And so they went through like complete beginner as well. So a certification is a hierarchy, right? You have a certificate authority, and that like it delegates it to a different certificate authority that then delegates it eventually into the certificate that you're actually there. So if you go, for example, let's go for GitHub. I'll share my screen again. You can take a look at this, right? On the padlock. You can take a look at the certificate. It's a bit small, sorry. But you can see, take a look at the certification path. It is so this is a DigiCert, what do you call this? The DigiCert is the ultimate signing authority for this, which delegates it to this entity called DigiCert High Assurance TLS Hybrid. So it's probably a kind of stratification of their different kinds of certificates, which ultimately delegates into the certificate that is installed on the GitHub servers. So there can be chains of what do you call this, of certificates depending on the what do you call this, depending on the authority. Let's go here. This is a DST root. I'm not sure which authority this is, but it's a root certificate authority that's called DST R3, and then it delegates to this, right? Then you can see the things here. So you have different hierarchies, but ultimately the top level, this one, is the one that your browser has hard-coded in. Well, not hard-coded in, but is referring to. Like it traces the certificates up until here, which is why when browsers are updated, they will, like, because these are, I forgot how long the root certificates last, probably 2 years, I'm not sure, but they have a lifetime and they get expired. And when they do expire, then they're not trusted anymore. They have to issue issue new certificates. And you need browser updates so that these root certificates are always updated on the browser level. Which is why, like, let's say a browser from 1990 probably won't negotiate SSL anymore, because the certificates from its list does not match all of the certificates that are current right now. Like all of the certificates it knows of are expired. But this is like what you'd call a chain of trust in terms of certificates. Good questions, actually. These are the things that software developers, especially the ones working on websites, should know, but I feel people are just not interested in and are not looking at, because especially with this development of DevOps, like, oh, we have an SSL problem, let the DevOps handle it. Instead of, it's a DevOps, it's developer operations. You as a developer should know how your infrastructure operates and should at least be able to give hints. You might not be an expert, but at least you understand what in the world is happening in your infrastructure. Yeah, exactly. It's in production now. You throw it over the fence, and then it's ops problem now. So it's a very sad situation, which DevOps is supposed to fix. But now DevOps is the new ops. Like now you have all of these Docker Kubernetes experts that I don't understand what is happening there, and then so let them handle the deployment stuff. It's the same problem just with a new name. So again, this is what we're trying to do with this series of workshops, to try to bring back infrastructure into development, software development.
Yeah, going back to the vanilla. Back to basics.
Back to basic. All right, I guess if there are no more questions, we'll end the stream, but we'll still be on Slack. We can still like chat, or like if you have any more questions, we'll just answer there. We won't answer on the stream anymore, and we won't be neckbeards anymore trying to profess our philosophies over the internet. We'll do it on Slack instead. Yeah.
Okay, thanks so much, Tristan and Gui, for preparing everything for the workshop. I guess this is the end of it. So I'll see everybody next month. What is the date next month? First Tuesday will be 6th of July. All right, see everybody then. And like Tristan said, right, we're always around in Slack. So if anyone has any questions or just want to have a discussion, feel free to pop by in Slack. Just very quickly, let me just flash up the link again. Here we go. bit.ly Ruby MI Slack. Okay, I think that's all. Thanks, everybody.
Bye. See you again.